So, dear
Oh.
colleagues, hello again. It's great to meet you in our book's launch. Our cordial thanks once again for your outstanding contributions and wonderful collaboration with us, making this volume a thriving, symbiotic experience. And of course, warm thanks to our host today, Professor Christine Daigle, Director of Posthumanism Research Institute of Brock University. Let's start with a short presentation of our volume. By focusing on the notion of symbiosis, this volume aspires to contribute to rethinking human subjectivity and agency in the 21st century as shaped by dynamic interplays between nature, technology, science, and culture. Biology and natural sciences have developed the study of symbiosis to elucidate its role in life's evolution on Earth and access various relationships among life forms. According to Lynn Margulis, symbiosis is up to the organization of the living. The concept of symbiosis has its roots in the Greek verb symbiono, which means live in close connection, ideally referring to mutual and beneficial living. However, symbiosis can take various forms, commensalism, parasitism, etc. Symbiosis has a growing recognition as a core principle of contemporary biology, replacing an essentialist conception of individuality. Symbiosis may thus provide an eventual epistemic ground for reconstructing humanity's natural science coalitions and bridging between posthumanism and environmental humanities, which are both prominent trends of the current global discussion about the future of humanity and the reimagining of the humanities. Symbiotic posthumanist ecologies in Western literature, philosophy, and art, towards theory and practice, opening with Pramon Nayar and Francesca Ferrando's forewords, is divided into three parts. The speculation about posthumanist ecologies is conducted through an interdisciplinary dialogue of critical theory, Western literature, art, and philosophy. The cybocentric lens adopted here elucidates issues regarding the concept and potential narrative of symbiosis. As Christine Daigle points out, storytelling, philosophical, literary, artistic, or otherwise, is presented as a key method in bringing into life the challenges and experiences faced by the many beings. The volume aspires to stimulate further the exploration of the complex recompositions of the human in the 21st century and looks for resonant frequencies in the perception of humans and non-humans.
This dialogue starts by posing ontological and ethical issues in interspecies communication. Roberto Marquezines perceives techne as a virus, which means that our hybridization with technology, as in artificial intelligence, is not under the control of humans. Teresa Heffernan underlies the ethical problem of rights concerning humans, robots, and animals in the Anthropocene and the risks of the collapse of animals and machines in the capitalist smart industry discourse. Nicole Anderson discusses the philosophical and political impact of the reduction of deconstruction when posthumanism pursues the dissolution of the boundaries and differences between humans and non-human to challenge anthropocentrism. Irene Sanz-Alonso discusses the fluid and entangled nature of identity in a posthuman world and the importance of empathetic feelings for cross-species communication. Accordingly, Bruce Clark explores recent biochemistry trends concerning plant communication and cross-species understanding through common sensory, cognitive, and communicative modalities. The importance of broadening our perception and consciousness is highlighted as a prerequisite for our symbiotic relationships with non-human others. Mickey Ball foregrounds the role of affect in our understanding of art and literature and proposes the anthropomorphic imagination as a reading attitude that emotionally experiences characters and figures are resembling real people. Glenn Mazis proposes in his phenomenological account the exercise of the physiognomic imagination as an effort to bring forth the latent sense communicated to perceivers by the things themselves. On the other hand, Alexandra Lukasiewicz focuses on the cyber-sized body as a medium to further explore this symbiosis with the non-human world. Cassandra Falke and Avital Ornell reflect upon the precarity of our inbuilt and understanding of humans as shaped by natural forces we often strive to instrumentalize. Energy exchange issues in our relationship with the more than human world are also explored by Dimitris Ankelatos through the metabolic energy of art and David Fancy via matters of resonance involving the Earth's energetic bodies and forces. Peggy Karpozou and Fred Evans delve into new symbiotic citizenship forms in a more than human world that would avoid the damages caused by the capitalist Anthropocene. This alternative political ethics could assist us in envisaging a new symbiotic era in which human beings are not the only essential actors.
To sum up, the core message of this volume is that networks, webs, and entanglements open new ways to criticize anthropocentric thinking and elaborate new possibilities and potential ways of becoming world together. Symbiotic posthumanist ecologies are proposed as an innovative planetary narrative about the biosphere and technosphere. The proposed symbiotic turn, by foregrounding the multi-layered interconnectivity, welfare, and risks of symbiotic life forms, raises an ecological consciousness that requires new thinking, ethics, and affirmative biopolitics for the more than human citizens of this world. Thank you.
And now, if I may, I would like to give my deep gratitude and wholeheartedly thanks to my supervisor, Professor Peggy Karpozou, as I have gained experience and learned a lot working with her in this project, in this volume. Thank you very much, dear Professor Karpozou.
Dear Nikoleta, thank you very much for your excellent organizational skills that you have all experienced and working with me for this volume. So we may proceed with the presentations, short presentations of each chapter by our contributors. Dear Mike, the floor is yours.
Okay, I will be obedient to your timetable, which said 2 to 3 minutes. So I will do my best. And I will just focus on my interest in terminology that comes from a resistance against the cheap, free-floating usages of prepositions, terms, and slogans that wear out the precision of language, which, as Karen Barat insists, matters in the two senses of the word. It is important, in other words. And one of my obsessions in this respect is the abuse of the preposition post, which claims superiority over the past, dismissing it as no longer relevant or even existing. The worst instance of this is the qualifier post-colonial, which denies the ongoing colonial situation in the world. Most harshly visible in what sociologist Eva Illouz has termed emotional capitalism, which is the merging of capitalist and erotic seduction. Now, instead of symbiosis, that is a word that not everybody knows, I have come up with a word that does not exist, intership, with inter instead of post, as the alternative to the deeply problematic pervasive culture of post. Intership brings together all activities qualified with the preposition inter, from interdisciplinary to intertextual, international, intermedial, intercultural to interdiscursive. We know them all, but we don't realize how important that preposition is. Inter means between. It harbors a willingness to exchange on an equal basis. It is relational. And relevantly, intership sounds close to the more common term internship, which in English means the learning through practice that students do between their scholarly and their professional trainings. And I like that association because we have to learn about a different world. The collective project of academic thinking is steeped in an attempt to move forward, to discover new ideas. And this is, of course, very useful. However, when the preposition post is affixed to new developments, such as post-structuralism, currently even post-structuralism, people dare say that, we get caught in an evolutionist ideology. And this ideology considers the present as beyond, after, and of course, better than what came before. Now, let's keep in mind how it also leads to contempt for cultural differences with the consequence that cultures other than our own are automatically considered in terms of backwardness, as underdeveloped, as we used to call them, or in an attempt to appear a bit more ethical, but still only in terminology, and no less condescending, developing countries. However, the tendency to jump over the hurdle to actually have to first get to know, understand, and deploy that which one seeks to overcome leads to regress, not progress. And I should already stop, right? I have one more paragraph, is that okay? This is why I recommend to be cautious with the terms such as post-human, which in the beginning we had under discussion. And I gladly saw it replaced with post-humanist, rejecting the human-centeredness that is indeed problematical and is encouraged by terms like the humanities, for example. However, human-centeredness is not the same as taking human beings as well as other beings seriously. And in this, I have been influenced by 17th century immigrant philosopher Baruch Spinoza, especially his articulation of the distinction between guilt and responsibility. It is that distinction that precludes a post attitude, a surpassing of the past without taking the responsibility in the present on board. True, we, as we live now, cannot be held guilty of the colonization that happened before our birth. But this does not relieve us of the consequences, the ongoing inequality for which we remain responsible. And the desire to escape that responsibility is, I contend, one of the strong motivations for the post attitude. It is why that attitude cannot be sustained in terminology. And this is one of many reasons why I have made a plea for anachronism or the mutuality of time. And I've called that with one of my academic imaginative neologisms, pre-posthumous, with a hyphen in between pre and post. Thank you.
Mike, thank you, dear Mike. We always learn from you. So I skip my, who is the next? Nikoleta, can you?
Yes. You are the next one, Professor Karpozou.
Skip me. I will be the last one.
Dear Alexandra, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Me? Okay, welcome. It is my pleasure, although I was, to say truth, not that well prepared that, or not that aware that I will be presenting today, but I will try to tell briefly what was the aim of my paper and what did I do there. So I think that I focused on real cyborg persons that already do exist. That is Neil Harbison and Moon Ribas, who are active as artists, and they are using their technologically upgraded bodies as medium for their art creation. And I was tracing in details specific artworks that they are doing. Neil Harbison, if not everybody knows, is so-called the first officially recognized cyborg because he has got antenna implanted into his brain that is visible on his passport photo, British passport photo. So he was allowed, admitted, basing on the argumentation that it is integral body part, to have this not device, but the body part on the passport photograph. And he is, with this antenna, he is hearing light frequencies and colors, and this in his bone conduction. And this ability he uses to transform sounds to images and images to sound. So we may say that he explores technologically achieved synesthesia, transforming audio situations to visual images and the other way around. while Munribas is having an implant in her elbow that allows her to feel earthquakes, and she uses this in order to manifest through her body the movements of Earth in her dance performances. Why I was doing this, why I'm going to the sensibility of or technologically augmented sensibility. I think that it is the way in between two kind of radical paths. One that is getting rid of the human in the net of relations, and the other of thinking of only about this computational side of technological development, of mind uploading, and this kind of issues. So thinking about cyborgization of the body, that is a kind of symbiotical node between technology and biology, having an individual that is not separated from the others, but really emerging from this net of interrelations is important, I think. Here also, in such situation, it is also possible to think about certain kind of agency and responsibility, what is the subject that I develop in other places more. Tracing this development of these changes of sensibility with the use of technology, I recognize also this, that in the general art production or art creation structure, not much changes, because artists always were using their aesthetic experiences, their sensible experiences, their bodies in order to create their art. And here with the cyborg persons, the situation is the same. The form of the body is changed, of course. It also already has kind of consumed, taken inside the technology, but it is still the body, experiencing body, sensible body, that is the medium of art. And I think that it is important to think about this technologically transformed sensibility nowadays, because it is our perceptions in the environment are forming our embodied beliefs, our approaches and practices. So we can also think how this technologically developed environment can also transform our forms of knowledges, our approaches, and our beliefs. So this should be mined together. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, dear Alexandra. We are going to continue with David, I think. We also gonna speak us about Earth frequencies, energy issues, and the floor is yours, David.
Oh, thanks so much, and thank you again for organizing this volume, for the really clear and regular communications. The whole process has been enjoyable and smooth, and it's a luxury to spend time with such interesting and esteemed colleagues. I'm just going to read two paragraphs to give a sense of this chapter. So the title is Geomancy versus Technomancy, Resonance, Divination, and Gilbert Simondon's Thought. So the chapter posits geomancy, the art of engaging magically with the earth, to be a divinatory and resonative genre, both in its practice, but also in the way in which it thinks. The figure of the geomancer, the one who harnesses the complex relationalities between themselves and the earth's many energetic bodies and forces, is intuitive rather than psychic. The geomancer is therefore not concerned with discerning the future, focusing instead on the ability to access and crystallize the complex availabilities and relationalities of any particular present moment. The chapter invokes Simondon's work on resonance to provide a framework within which to understand the work of the geomancer, as well as to contrast the work of the geomancer with that of the technomancer, one alienated from resonative trans-individuality and bound up largely in the accelerated electromagnetic rhythms of techno-capital, deleterious to biological systems. The chapter posits an entire field of philosophical study, ecology, as one that can deal with speculation, consideration, and critique of anything having to do with rhythm and ontogenesis. The figure of the geomancer is proposed as a central conceptual persona involved in non-supremacist geophilosophical and geoartistic trans-individual resonative activities that can help us imagine futures outside and beyond the Anthropocene. I suggest ecology with its specific etymological source to determine a field of inquiry. So Ikea or Achaea were vibratory urns in Greek and Roman theaters, these large urns that amplified actors' voices and muted some other sounds and amplified cosmic noise. And these Ikea and ecology, I refer to this sort of anthro source as a strategically placed artifact to remind myself that while I may want to think geomantically beyond the human, for those of us who are human, we are necessarily moored here. I find it useful to be reminded of my anthropological positionality as an alienating prompt to attempt, impossibly, to think beyond it in a geomantic mode, to imagine thinking resonance with resonance, from resonance or via resonance. Resoduction, the vibration that invents, constitutes and precipitates thought while simultaneously generating and carrying, ductere, the concept. Resoductive thought, like the Achaea themselves, serving as a conduit for the concept to be uttered, intelligible, and engaged with before returning to the state of achronic rhythmicity that inheres within it. As the geomancer knows intimately, ecology as resonative thought engages reverberatively with a whole range of energetic and vibratory phenomena, modulatory behaviors, and rhythmic singularities. So I carry that forward and examine the ways in which technocapital has done some pretty remarkable but unsurprising work in capturing background and existing resonative frequencies for the purposes of accelerative capital, and the geomancer as a possible figure that can provide means and ways through and beyond that mode of technocapital capture. Thank you.
Many thanks, dear David, for this elucidating presentation of your chapter. And I think from resonances, we can pass to voices and to Deleuzian cosmopolitanism and beyond. So, dear Fred, the floor is yours.
First, I too want to thank you and Nikoleta for all the generous help that you gave to me, and I imagined everyone else in putting the volume together and getting our articles ready for it. So thank you very, very much for that. I'm very happy to be here today and hear what other people are doing. For the last few years, I've been working on cosmopolitanism, and the article for the book we are celebrating today is part of that endeavor and is entitled Deleuzian Cosmopolitanism from the Capitalist Axiomatic to the Chaosmocene. The article revolves around the following question: how does Deleuzian cosmology contribute to cosmopolitanism's search for a political ethics of world, indeed cosmic togetherness? More specifically, how can such a cosmology help us overcome global capitalism on the one hand, and on the other, replace the geological Anthropocene with the geological chaosmocene? My answer to these questions involved intertwining Gilles Deleuze's ideas with some of my own. I started with a detailed exposition of Deleuze's main ideas, especially his description of the cosmos as chaosmos, or composed chaos, and then also being as, quote, the single and same voice for the thousand-voiced multiplicity, and unquote, and the implication of these two, that the cosmos has three fundamental characteristics: the solidarity of the voices of the cosmos, but also their heterogeneity or singularity, and their fecundity, that is, the production of new voices through the creative interplay among them. For my part, I affirmed but also converted these three characteristics into three virtues embodied in the political ethics that cosmopolitanism seeks. Heterogeneity remains the singularity of each voice. Fecundity remains the creative interplay that produces new voices, but solidarity becomes three commitments shared by the polity. The first is the commitment to affirm all three of the virtues as equally important. No one of them can be canceled out by the others. The second commitment is to speak courageously and to hear all voices courageously. That is, to practice the ancient Greek idea of parrhesia. And the third is to resist all voices that are raised to the level of what I call an oracle. That is, the one true God, the pure race, patriarchy, capitalism, or any other absolutist discourse that attempts to diminish or eliminate the creative interplay among voices and what we can call parrhesiastic democracy. On the basis of these ideas, I drew a number of other implications for the political ethics that cosmopolitanism seeks. But the two main ones use the three commitments to promote, in league with Deleuze, the deterritorialization and overcoming of the capitalist axiomatic, as well as replacing the Anthropocene with what we can call the Chaosmocene. The latter, the Chaosmocene, implies that we must try to understand the language or communicative actions of each voice in the cosmos and celebrate the ethical standing that they have beyond our self-centered uses of them. We must, in short, think of them in a spirit of cooperating with them rather than that of dominating or mastering them. Said otherwise, this commitment to try and hear all voices is a fair, if perhaps somewhat different version of Deleuze's ultimate ethical and cosmological idea of becoming everybody, everything. Thank you.
Thank you a lot. Thanks a lot, dear Fred, for your brilliant presentation and chapter, all of your chapters. It's a tremendous honor to collaborate with all of you. That's the mere truth about this volume. And we have to continue with philosophy, and from the chaos and the voices back to the things themselves. And Merleau-Ponty with Professor Mazis. Dear Glenn, the floor is yours.
So I have to start by, like everyone else, thanking Peggy and Nikoleta. I mean, not for thinking of the volume, first of all. I love the theme of the volume, and for all your great shepherding us along and organizing this. And having this forum today is great to hear. And I've been part of so many volumes, but this is the first time I've gotten to hear everybody else talk about their chapters, so it's great, so thank you. Okay, I don't want to take up too much of my time, so I try to pack every idea into my title, so I'm just going to read my title. A Posthumanist Truly Back to the Things Themselves, Merleau-Ponty's Embodied Phenomenology and Literary Language. And it's kind of ironic that, you know, I live in the United States culture that's so obsessed with materiality, with materialism, things, collecting more things, and yet I'd say we've never been more alienated from materiality and what the things really are. And I don't think phenomenology, it started out doing much better, and so I'll quickly get to my article. So, you know, Husserl's, of course, famous motto, which was the sort of guiding spirit of phenomenology, was back to the things themselves, to combat the natural attitude as he saw it with this kind of naive realism. And yet he still had human beings, our consciousness, as the constituting center of sense, which to me is still a humanist philosophy, still an Enlightenment philosophy. I mean, Fred and I could argue about that. There's many ambiguities in Husserl, but still, I think there was an important move to Merleau-Ponty's embodied phenomenology, because as other people are talking about, it's a move to describe this pre-reflective sensibility. And on the level of pre-reflective sensibility, then the self is decentered into the world. It's looking at how the self returns from the world, as Merleau-Ponty says. Perception is like a fission into the world and a long journey back to oneself through the world, where the things themselves as he calls it, have a voice, and he's borrowing this phrase from Marot, have voices of silence. There's a dialogue between us and things if we really bother to listen. And if we hearken to the silence within language, instead of being so caught up in what he calls empirical language, getting things done, using language as a tool, which doesn't slow down and hearken and listen to the silence and let the things around us really speak in their voices of silence. So Merleau-Ponty called this an indirect ontology, that you couldn't directly capture things in concepts. And in some ways, he abandoned concepts. I mean, his own language became more and more poetic. And I think there is a lesson for phenomenological philosophy in that we have to get to a real ontology, to really encounter also the animals around us, as well as the things, as well as the people, that we have to, instead of stepping back from our embeddedness in things, we have to enter into the embeddedness of things, which also includes, and as many of the other chapters are about, history, culture, politics, economics. But I'm focusing here on this other stratum of our communication with the world, our dialogue with the world in this indirect language. So, and Merleau-Ponty's word, by the way, was reversibility, which I think is kind of comparable to your use of symbiosis. That he's saying, that if we really allow it, there's a kind of dialogue among humans and with the cosmos, if you want to say, Fred, with all the things around us, with animals, and that I in my chapter, I point to several literary examples of that are expressed so beautifully. There's Leslie Marmon, Silko, her Native American novel of Ceremony, and I quote a long passage about the protagonist listening to the dragonflies, and the dragonflies have these immemorial stories that his grandparents and ancestors knew quite well, and he's trying to recapture. And I also look at Virginia Woolf and To the Lighthouse, and what exactly is going on between Mrs. Ramsay and the lighthouse, which gives her sense of self, but a sense of self that is very much thrown beyond her normal role in society, and is thrown back into her kind of belonging within the natural world. And the third one, I forget, what's the third one? Oh, yes. There's another literary example I use. Oh, yes, of course. Proust, who constantly was Merleau-Ponty's source of inspiration. And, whether I talk about swans hearing the 5 notes of the sonata and somehow, for the first time, getting a sense of what true love would be like, and not just a self-centered possessiveness of the other. So in all these ways, I'm trying to show that philosophy can capture that kind of reversibility on this pre-reflective, sensible level, but it has to turn to literature to do that, or literary language, what Merleau-Ponty called creative or expressive language, versus this more empirical language. So I think I've used up my time, and I'll stop.
Warm thanks again and again, Professor Mazis, and I'm continue this dialogue with literature, and with Cosmos, from Cosmos and things, I will pass to cities, real cities and fictional cities. So my chapter about symbiotic citizenship in post-human urban ecosystems, smart biocities in speculative fiction, foregrounds the necessity of a dialogue among up-to-date scientific research about smart cities, critical theory, and representations of urban futures in science fiction. The eco-precarity induced by Anthropocene's modes of living accentuates the need for the development of sustainable and resilient urban communities. The analysis investigates how fundamental concepts and principles such as symbiosis, ecosystem, agency, citizenship, and democracy shape and are reshaped by the symbiotic concept of smart biocity. A paradigm shift, an environment where the digital and the biological merge could be our urban model for the hybrid city to come, acknowledging the interplay of human and more than human agencies in a complex web of processes. By speculating about the potential forms and functionalities of symbiotic processes in more than human civil identities, this chapter explores the challenges of resilience, sustainability, democracy, and multi-species citizenship posed by the smart biocities, both in the real world and fiction. It highlights the role of literature in visualizing the eventually inconceivable projections of urban environments in extreme conditions like climate change, and reforming scientific data that is unclear for many non-experts into embodied stories that impart new knowledge and understanding beyond our anthropocentrism. This way, we might become more inventive and effective in modeling our symbiotic planetary futures. Thank you.